Marnie, thank you for joining me.
Hello.
All right, where do we even begin? I feel like you have a cocktail of diagnoses, right?
I do have a cocktail of diagnoses. That's true. Yes, that is true.
So which one came first? I think it was probably the MS diagnosis came first, right?
Yep. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in November 2018. So been navigating that for a little while. And then ADHD, I was diagnosed with that in, I guess, November also. Maybe it was December of like 2021. It's been an interesting thing where you're just kind of like, okay, I have this. I'm kind of like navigating this. And it's like, oh, wait, just kidding. You have this. So it's all these just kind of like different perspectives of constantly like changing the way that I view the world and myself within it. But I guess that's adulthood, right?
Right. Yeah, totally. But I think a lot of women who were diagnosed with autoimmune disorders, which are becoming more and more common, attribute a lot of ADHD traits to the autoimmune diagnosis, right? And so you see that a lot. And then it's like, oh my God, how do I even begin to unpack all of this idea that a lot of the autoimmune disorders are related to stress and trauma.
Yes.
And, that's something we have in spades.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, of course, we all have, trauma to some extent for various reasons, but especially I feel like, right, if we're like neurodivergent and kind of like gaslit our whole lives and you're like, the way that I understand the world is maybe different than everybody else. And then later you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm always like, why am I so depressed and anxious all the time?
I know.
So what was going on that first led to the MS diagnosis? I know you talk about it a little bit on your website, but what was first happening?
I'm a personal trainer, and so I've started doing that since 2010. And so I was going into work one day, actually, and I was just like warming up. I was doing a barbell snatch. I had like a bar. I was trying to pull it over my head. And as I was bringing it up, all of a sudden my shoulder just like wouldn't stabilize the bar. Like, it was just kind of like wobbly. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, maybe I like pulled a muscle or twinged something. So tried to kind of work it out. Didn't happen. And so I was like, yeah, that's weird. Maybe I'll just kind of switch up what I'm going to do today. I'll do a different focus. So I went and was like doing something else workout wise. But I went home and I was like, this still feels really weird. And like my fine motor skills were weird. Like taking a key into our apartment wasn't working well. So I was like, yeah, I must have just like really messed up a nerve. So I had Kaylin, my wife, who's been on your show. I had her like try to like rub it out. But it was like a few days where it had kind of continued and like started getting worse. But then the real kicker was that my eyes actually stopped tracking. So like when my right eye was like not tracking with the left one. And so people were like, oh, are you having a stroke? And I was like, maybe. So like, I don't know. So like, I mean, not to like make fun of or like make light of things. Sometimes when I would train my clients, because I was like, am I would be like, if I'm having a stroke, let me know, but not to make light of that. But so I went and I got an MRI, and then had 4 lesions on my brain. And so it was like, oh, it's MS. So.
I often talk about how we use humor to cope with traumatic events in our life, and how so many times when I'm on this podcast, I say things as I'm laughing, being like, oh yeah, all that abuse we experienced. So it's such a
hilarious,
right? I'm like, every stand-up comic is ADHD. I'm
convinced. 100%. Yeah. I mean, how else can you even come up with comedy if you haven't experienced trauma?
That's crazy. And are you having a stroke is never a question you want to answer with maybe. But it says a lot about like how incapable we are so often of paying attention to our bodies.
100%. Yes. And I think especially right with neurodivergency and like being in the fitness world, I always think that's such an interesting thing too. I think that so many people, like when I work or when I train people or I work with people, I feel like there's such a, a disconnect from our bodies, I guess, in like, I don't know, does this feel good to me? Does this not feel good to me? Is this like a type of movement that I like doing? It's just more like, this is what I'm supposed to do or what somebody told me to do, so I'm going to start doing it. And then it's like, no wonder we keep burning out, from things when we aren't great at listening to our bodies. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And that just happened to me recently at the beginning of the beginning of the year. I was having all of these this vertigo and dizziness and all of this stuff that was coming back. And I had this in the past. And so I went and was like getting my jaw looked at because I thought it was TMJD again. And it turned out that it was not TMJD. It was literally stress from my neck and my shoulders. And that there was like my neck was so tense that it was causing all of this vertigo and tinnitus and hearing. It was, I was like, you have to be fucking kidding me that this is stress related. Because I'm like, I'm a health coach. I'm a yoga instructor. Like, and it was just like all these shoulds, right? I'm like, oh my God, I should know better. And I just was like, but at the same time, it's so fitting that it is stress related because we let it get to those points where it's like our bodies are screaming.
Right. Sometimes I think too, people like us who are like trying so hard to be like, I'm fixing all the things, right? It's like, I'm doing all the things. I'm in fitness. I'm doing these. And it's like, oh yeah, well actually that's stress in and of itself. So no wonder. Like,
right. I know. Well, I know. I feel that way about anxiety sometimes where I get like really bad anxiety breathing where I can't feel my lungs. And I'm like, I have to stop and be like, what is giving me anxiety right now? And I'm like, what isn't giving me anxiety right now? And then I'm like, the thing that is giving me the most anxiety is the breathing right now. And so I'm like, well, now what do I do?
That's very true. I know. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like I can't take a deep breath, but then I'm like, I like get hyper focused almost on trying to do it, you know? So I'm like, can I get a deep breath? I'm like, okay, this is
I know, right?
Thinking if I can breathe. Yeah. So that's awful.
You're just like, oh yes, the signs were there all along.
100%.
So, okay. So then what were you attributing certain ADHD traits to the MS or like where did you start? How did you start connecting the dots with the ADHD?
So ADHD, that's a good question. I'm gonna think about that if I attribute it to MS because I very much may have. But I think, well, in some ways, I think somewhat anxiety because I started experiencing, I think I started becoming more aware of anxiety within my life. But because like lesions can be on different parts of your brain, I think there was an aspect of me that was like, maybe it is like MS, right? Like maybe there's like a lesion on my brain that's creating anxiety. But it was, so that time, it was December 2021 that, like, this sounds so random, but I do a lot of virtual training with my clients and I would be training people and I would just notice that like, I could not focus, but all I was focusing on were like really like weirdly stressy things. But the stressy things I was focusing on were things like, do we have enough vegetables for the week? Like I'd be like, oh my God, okay, we have broccoli for Monday. We have, like Brussels sprouts for Tuesday. Like I couldn't stop though, and I was like, maybe I have OCD, like maybe, and it was like, I remember talking to my therapist about it and she was like, you need to stop doing that because it's not healthy. And I was like, okay, like I would like to stop doing that too. But it's not, like, please tell me how, this isn't helpful. And so I actually went to a psychiatrist to talk about like that, like, do I have OCD? My wife actually at that time, a couple months prior, had been diagnosed with ADHD. And so she was like, I think you have ADHD. But I think a piece of me was like, because she got diagnosed, then I felt weird being like, oh yeah, me too. Like, I have this diagnosis too. So I was like, I'm going for my own diagnosis, like it's this. But so when I was explaining it to my psychiatrist, she was like, have you ever considered that you have ADHD? And I was just like, of course. So I don't know if my brain was just like latching on. It was like, I need something else to focus on. Let me focus on anxiety or like, I'm not exactly sure like what exactly that was. But as her and I chatted a ton, then it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see this.
Oh my God, that's so funny. And because it's like, there are many of us who say our partners are 100% neurotypical. And I used to say that about my husband when I was first diagnosed, because I was like, he's so different from me. He's got to be neurotypical. But now the more I learn about ADHD and the more I like pay attention, I'm like, ADHDers are so attracted to each other.
100%.
That I'm like, I think we're just complementary neurodivergents.
Yeah. We would laugh about that all the time because I was like, I have a few friends, who I've seen like on social media and things like that. They're like, oh, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which I didn't know that they did younger. And I was like, I feel like everybody has it now. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, maybe it's just the people that I've always been, connected to for whatever reason. Otherwise, I'm not your friend. So that makes sense.
Right. Well, I don't know if you feel this way about your clients, but like I used to, my coaching was primarily with diet recovery and binge eating recovery. Oh, yeah. And so I was like, oh, I need to go and contact all of my past clients and be like, surprise, we have ADHD.
That's so true. Yeah, that is so true. I have told clients that before. I'm like, I think that you also have this. Or, oh no, my son does, but I don't. And I'm like, okay, we'll just keep throwing those, I'll keep throwing those little pieces at you. So that,
right? Those like, did you know that's a thing? That's a thing with ADHD. I do that all the time. Yeah. Okay. So so you were diagnosed, and then what were you where did you look back and think, okay, the signs were clearly there all along?
I mean, I kind of feel like all the things, to be honest. I I feel like one of them is like, I have some real good impulsivity. And like, there were so many things I feel like, especially as a kid, that I would always do because I thought that they were funny, but like, I might know that like, this isn't a social norm, but like other people might not think it's funny, but I think it's funny. So I'm going to do it kind of thing. Like, I don't know, just sometimes like in classes, like trying to like kind of being like the class clown, like, I'm going to give this speech today in an operatic voice, or I'm going, just like random things that I would do because I thought that they were funny. And then I was realizing like, oh, okay, yeah, I think there's like a little impulsivity in there. I have insane, like, I said, like time paralysis. I don't remember what it's called, but like where there's like something later in the day and I like feel like I can't do anything, like even like this, we were meeting today at 11. I got done working. I trained some people this morning at 9. And so I had 2 hours and I was like, what 2 hours? What am I going to do? Like I have this, I can't do anything because this is like really like frozen in my time. That is a huge one for me. Yeah, those are really big ones. I get involved in all the things. That's one too. Like, I feel like I was like in orchestra and I was in sports and I was in, just all these like different clubs and groups. And so, always like a little bit of an interest where it's like, I just kind of want to do all the things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just sports, right? I mean, I think a lot of kids end up in competitive sports because of ADHD, right? Their parents were like, you need to run this out.
Right.
And, so many elite athletes have ADHD that you feel like, there is certainly that connection there with childhood sports and how it helps, right? Like just how it helps your thought process and your neural pathways and all of that stuff.
100%. Yeah. And music, like, and my wife and I are really big Broadway fans. And I'm always like, all these people, like, they're all neurodivergent, like, makes sense why we, like, connect within all these realms. And yeah, for sure.
Well, and you and Kaylin met on the rowing team, right?
We did. College? Yes.
So was there anyone else on your team that you have to go back and be like, surprise?
Oh, we haven't really, I guess, like, thrown the diagnoses on people, but we probably should. We'll make a list and send out like a little email, like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a couple of years, but I think I can solve your problems with this diagnosis.
Right. Well, and the other thing with elite athletes too is that when they experience an injury or when they're kind of derailed, that's where a lot of the ADHD symptoms start to play out, and where it's like all that structure, all that rigor is gone, and so then they start to really struggle with a lot of the executive dysfunction stuff. Did you notice that? How was your executive functioning kind of before and after the MS diagnosis? Did you notice differences?
I think that, so we talk about like stress and trauma, right? I feel like there was a piece of me that really operated on just like this overdrive all the time. So I don't think I was ever really aware if I was like having executive function or whatnot, because it was like this like weird dissociation from how I feel about anything. That's, I think, why it took me a little while to get diagnosed with ADHD, because, people are like, oh, do you have a hard time doing X, Y, Z? And it was like, no, because I just like, I override everything and I go like crazy until that MS diagnosis, which then it was kind of like, oh, like I think it kind of sat me on my ass to be like looking back at everything and like, I need to chill out, like I can't keep like living my life like this. Where I was like living very, very regimented in a lot of ways. I was like, okay, like I'm gonna do my meal preps and I'm gonna do this and like, just all the things. And so it's hard for me, I guess, to kind of identify sometimes, like if I had this executive function then, or sometimes even, I feel like even like when I talk to my therapist, and it's like, did you have depression at this time? And I'm like, I think I was so disconnected sometimes from my like inner feelings for like a big period of time that. Yeah, I think that it's just it's kind of a weird space sometimes to think like if something affected me prior or not. Does it now? Yes. Like it's way harder now. Now that I've kind of sat back, and it's still a struggle for sure, but to be like, I can't live my life like that, like just in like sympathetic, overdrive all the time. And so now sometimes like trying to not be like that, it is definitely more challenging for me to kind of have that executive function to get myself to do a lot of different things.
Right. I think that's a balance a lot of us struggle with, and why so many of us have difficulty with like vacations and rest and weekends and unstructured time. Because it's like a lot of the time it's like, I fear if I stop, I'm going to never start again.
Yes, literally.
Yeah. Right. And so it's like, and then I don't like the version of me that's lying around, not doing anything, because it makes me feel lazy and, makes me feel like I'm not doing anything. But at the same time, I'm burnt out and need rest. And that pendulum of back and forth and feeling like, how difficult it is for us to sort of enjoy restoration and relaxation and actually not feel like shit about it. Yeah. I know, right?
I know.
I'm getting better. I must say I'm getting better. And I think, in terms of, but I have to be really strict about like scheduling it. Like I can't just allow it to happen. I have to have a lot of boundaries around like, no, this is unstructured rest time.
That's
as
smart.
Opposed to, right? Because then it's like, then I feel like we spend a lot of our time in paralysis where it's like, I'm not getting anything done. So I'm going to feel like shit about myself.
Yeah.
And then, thinking about all the things we should be doing.
100%. Yeah.
And,
that is me constantly. And then whatever I choose, it's not right. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, okay, I'm doing this. Really, I should probably be doing this. Or it's like, oh, maybe I should really be social with other people. Oh no, I think I need alone time. Oh, but maybe, it's, it's like none of the things feel right ever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of scheduling it though. Yeah. Like, okay, this is my like 9:30 to 10 or whatever. Like, I don't know when that's my time, but it's probably not when I'm resting, but like, and because then maybe that gets rid of the guilt.
Right. Well, and I feel like as entrepreneurs too, we have a tendency to work 7 days a week. And so that's been really important for me to be like, this is a no work day. This is absolutely no. And like, I'll slap my own hand and because, you're like, oh, I have I want to update my website and do all these other things, all this like behind the scenes stuff. And I have to be like, no, it can wait.
But then it's like, but what am I going to do on my off day? Oh my gosh. Like sometimes I have that too, like, oh, I could go to this place. I could try a new coffee shop, and then it's like,
I know
all the things happen on my off day. And like,
right. I know that was a big realization for me just about vacations where it's like, I always felt so lazy and lethargic at home. But when I was on vacation, like my idea of a fun vacation is doing all these fun things and going out and doing all the things. Right. Yeah. And so I was like, that's my idea of rest and relaxation is doing all this fun things. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Cause I feel like, even though I spend a lot of time lying around scrolling my phone, like I don't find that fun.
Totally. Yeah, you're right. It's just like dopamine hit while I'm not doing something else. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been so interesting to think about just our relationship with rest and structure and all of the things. Yeah. Okay. So, one of the things I talk about a lot with my clients is the intersection of interesting and important. Right. And how I know Dr. Tamara Rosier talks about it in her book, Your Brain's Not Broken. She talks about it as this like quadrant of where does something fall in the important or the interesting. And things that are interesting are really effortless for us most of the time. But things that are important are things that we really, really struggle with because we get into that, I should be doing this. And so exercise tends to fall squarely in the important category for so many women, especially I think, which is like, we know it's good for us. I know I'm supposed to do it. I know all the things. I know what I need to be doing, but I just can't get out of bed or I just can't figure it out. So, so I feel like with this overlap, like what are some of the things about neurodivergent clients that you see when it comes to some of the things we tend to struggle with when it comes to movement?
Yeah, I think there's like so many components to that. I always say, I think one of the big ones, honestly, though, is like, I feel like it's kind of like a cliche like phrase, but like what your like why is for why you're, wanting to exercise in the first place. I think that society has basically told, especially women, right, that like we're never enough, right? You're not lean enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not, whatever. And so for you to actually be enough, that means that you need to be doing like hours and hours of cardio, and you need to get up and do all these things. And I just feel like that, and that's like so unmotivating, right? Like to come into this space of like, I really want to do this because I'm so terrible, like nobody wants to do that. You're just feeling crap. And also being on the elliptical for 5 hours is not fun. You can't tell me that it's fun, like somebody's like, no, I love it. No, you don't. Maybe you do. But so I think that there is a huge component to that if you can actually connect with something a little bit more on the like, this is why I want to do this, is because it makes me feel empowered, or it makes me feel, good. Like we know that exercise can increase dopamine and, other neurotransmitters within our brain. So again, with people with ADHD, like that's what we're looking for, right? So it's like, okay, I did my workout. I am getting dopamine. That's awesome. I also think though, like looking at it, from that interesting perspective is I actually made a little post on my social media yesterday that I was like, if you didn't care about your body composition, like what would you choose to do for your movement? And I think that there's so much, that comes into that where it's like, okay, well, I don't know, like I really want to go. I've heard people say like I like going bike riding, but I don't think my heart rate is elevated. So I feel like I'm going to go run instead, because I'd have to bike ride 3 times as long or something like that. Like there's things that give us joy, but that we choose to not do because it doesn't feel like it's quote worth it. And so I think that that's also a component is to, even if that is your goal, but like, if you just want to start moving, it's like, start thinking about things that like just feel good to you. I did sports forever. And then when I stopped doing sports, there's a lot of that, like, okay, what do I do with like, as far as like movement goes? And I feel like everybody just kind of falls into running because it's easy, like as far as just go outside and run. So I started doing that. I actually didn't like running, but then like Kaylin and I are big Walt Disney World fans. So we started signing up for the Disney races, which that actually was fun. Like that gives you, like you dress up in costumes, you get fun medals, you're running through the Magic Kingdom. Like there's nothing not fun about that. Except I guess if you don't like running, but there's this piece of me though, that was always like, okay, I had this race in January, so I feel like I need to be training for it. And I was never motivated to go out and run. But I personally actually really like strength training, which I know there's a lot of people who don't like that, but I almost would almost weirdly not let myself enjoy it and go all in, because this piece of me felt like running was like almost like what I was supposed to be doing. And when I got rid of that, and then I just like really, went into like, no, I just want to lift because I want to lift. My body hurt less. I, enjoyed my movement a lot more. So I think there's so much to do with that. And then also like, I'm just giving you all the things, but I think also like, honestly, making your space more exciting, I think is, really important. Or, I think everybody has their own things that they like. Like Kaylin, my wife, who has ADHD, she really, really likes working out in a space. I'm in my gym right now, but a space where there aren't other people. So she doesn't want to go into, like a 24-hour fitness or like a big box gym where there's a lot of other people. So some people like that, and maybe that's something that they need. Or maybe it's like you love classes and you want somebody to tell you what to do. So, maybe you start hitting up different group classes, Orange Theory, spin classes, etc. Maybe it's changing your music. Sometimes I'll like work out to, I don't know, I'll get my like inner like rock star on, or I'll go like lots of dance pop hits, or, I switch it up all the time. I'll switch up my outfits. Like sometimes I feel like there's like I have this new album I want to listen to. I'll listen to it while I work out, so kind of finding different ways also to make that exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was reminded when you were talking about a client who said to me, I don't have time to exercise because I'm walking my dog 3 times a day. And I was like, that counts. I was going to ask about the training for a 5K or training for marathons, because I feel like those are real, like a lot of us do that, right? It's like it's time bound. There's like a sense of urgency. There's a structure there. So it's like really appealing and checks a lot of boxes for us, but it's also time bound. So there is a tendency to be like, once it's done, then there's nothing to catch you, right? Yeah. There's not like a long term. So what do you feel like those sort of like, entering contests or any of those things, do you feel like that's a good idea, or is that not a great idea for our brains?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it really depends on the person, right? Like we all have different ways that we view things. I think that there is a sustainability component, I think that's a big thing just to ask people, or like, why are you doing it? Because like, are you just doing it because you want to experience this? And that's like something that's really cool and fun for you, go for it. Are you doing it because you feel like that's what you need to do, or like that's how you're, I think that's just like a big component, is like kind of challenging people to really think about, maybe you're just looking for that like external validation from other people, but also maybe that works for you, and like, maybe that's awesome and great. So, okay, cool. I think as long as you're aware of it. But I feel like in some ways that even comes to like certain diets, like that's not my focus, but I'll have people all the time like, hey, I'm doing intermittent fasting, I'm doing whatever. And that's always my biggest question is like, is this something that you can see yourself doing long-term? Or is this like a really quick thing and then we're not going to do it anymore? And so I think that's, a big thing just to consider if you're always kind of chasing those different things.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think sometimes, especially with nutrition, that seems to be one of the issues where a lot of us struggle when it comes to like, externalizing the structure of nutrition, which is like, we love diets because we're being told what to eat and when to eat and how much to eat. And we love keeping track and we love weighing and measuring and all of these things. And then watching our weight, like all of that is so appealing. But at the same time, we're not learning how to treat ourselves well outside of that structure. So when it becomes too much and we get burnt out inevitably, and then we're like, fuck it. And you go, but we have nothing to fall back on again. And so But the problem with intuitive eating for many people is it's just like too much freedom.
Right.
And people seem to be like, they're like, I don't know how to listen to my body. I don't know how to treat myself well. Like self-care in those ways are really difficult for a lot
I mean,
of us,
I'm 100% at that. I used to laugh all the time to like people, I have clients all the time tell me, oh, well, it's easy for you because you have like such great discipline. And I'm like, no, I do not. Like I was the kid when I was little that would like go to buffets and like eat so much I would puke. So like, not to like whatever, but like, I was like, that is not like, like food is absolutely good dopamine. You know what I mean? And like, not that people shouldn't, whatever, but like, I think like you said, like learning to listen, which, we chatted about that earlier, like that whole concept of like listening to your body. That's hard. And it's hard obviously for everybody. And I think again, like we're taught not to, it's like, you're like, oh yeah, like I'm somebody maybe who operates off of a circadian rhythm that's different than whatever, like too bad. You have to wake up at 7 because this is when school starts, or this is what, I mean, I think our whole lives we're taught like, this is what the structure is, whether it works for your body or not. And so you just need to fall in line. Like no matter, none of us can actually listen to what our intuition is. Like we were constantly taught not to.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think we have to also manage our expectations. We can't just like wake up one day and have it all figured out. And so that's where the idea of like, you're like, I refuse to give in to that one.
It's coming.
I'm keeping hope alive. Yeah. But that feeling of like, I'm so impatient and I want to have it all figured out now. And so I'm going to reach for the first thing that comes my way that's going to tell me that they're going to figure it out for me because we're
and
so
loves
adrift,
to do that.
right?
Yeah.
Right? I know. Yeah. I always use the metaphor of like, you're like flailing in a river and there's like floating things coming at you and you're just like grabbing every log and stick as it's coming by and nothing's helping. And then you just have to like let go and just go with the current.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that also reminds me about like my, the thing I do consistently when it comes to exercise is taking a walk every morning with my husband. And it has nothing to do with the walking, and it has everything to do with spending time with my partner and checking in. We talk about our week. We talk about the day. We talk about who's on dinner duty, all of that. It's always him, by the way. Spoiler alert, always him.
But you're still keeping it as an option.
I know. I was going to say the conversation is, what are you making for dinner tonight? I was just like, there's no conversation where we're deciding who's making it. But anyway, so that's what's the important part to me is like, without that, I feel like I can't start my day. And now it's become one of those things that we feel compulsively like, oh, what's missing, right? Yeah. And I think that's such an important part of movement and self-care, which is like, how do I take it from the I should do this to the I have to do this, I must do this. Yeah. And a lot of the time for many of us, if we have the means, we use a personal trainer because personal trainers create that sense of structure and accountability. Right. But I feel like I work with a lot of women who just feel like, oh, no, that's way too expensive. Right. I should figure out how to do this on my own. And then they're back to grabbing twigs and stuff. So I'm like, what would you say to the person who feels like stuck in that middle zone of I should be able to figure this out on my own? Yeah,
I guess I would say, let's get rid of those shoulds, right? Because it's like, again, I think society has created us that like we feel that way all the time. And it's not true. Nobody's been helping us out. So there's that. I think our bodies, I think too, like, again, there's so much of what people think like counts or doesn't count. And like, I have this where it's like, I think a lot of us have that all or nothing approach. So it's like, well, if it's not going to be, a full structured hour where I'm getting in cardio, strength, and mobility, then it doesn't count. And so I'm not going to do anything. And so it's like, also just knowing that like anything, it matters. And it can be something like, maybe you like to do like, what do I want to think of? Not the Wii, that's old. The Switch, the Nintendo Switch, where like maybe you like to play Just Dance, and like dance it out. That counts, or like I love the concept of walking. I also live in Omaha, Nebraska, and sometimes it is terrible outside, and so like, it was a month ago, it was like wind chills of -40. So like, that's hard too. I mean, obviously, like we are very lucky where we have like this gym space within our house. And a lot of people don't have that, but yeah, it can be stretching. They said it can be dancing. Like, it doesn't have to be something like so set. So I think that also, again, taking away some of the, like the shoulds and the shame of the pressure from society that tells us that it has to be a certain thing. You have to be doing 3 sets of 10 of XYZ, like and like, there are like so many studies though about the benefits of exercise on our brains, you know, on our overall mood, on our overall health, that again have nothing to do with body composition. I always say like, it makes me mad that I feel like aesthetics have like hijacked the fitness industry. You know, it's just like, everybody's just making it this show, but yeah, I mean, maybe you have to swim, or I think there, again, there's things that people like to do, but then they almost like stop doing them, or they stop counting them or whatever, because we don't feel like it's good enough. So I think that's like the biggest thing, is to kind of start reframing some of that. Like what feels good with you within your body. And, you know, maybe you want to go do a bunch of cartwheels in your living room, or like, you know, it could be something fun.
Yeah. I like that idea of, you know, feeling like anything can count. So it's almost like you're cheating a little bit, like lean into that, right?
Right. Yeah.
If it's a day that you can't do whatever, you know, full throttle thing you're expecting of yourself, be like, today's a cheat day where I can just like, even though that's has such a negative connotation in the dieting world, but but just this idea of like, you know, I can have minimal expectations of myself here and there, and still be a good person, a worthy person.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
One of the things I struggle with is like to keep track or not to track, trackers or no trackers, right? Because I know that I love metrics, and I know that I love like, you know, my watch and my Apple Watch and filling the rings and all of that stuff. But I also have a tendency toward extreme behaviors that can be damaging. And
100.
Right. So I'm like, I never decide if tracking is good or bad for me, because you know, if I miss a day, then I'm like, oh, screw it. Start fresh next week. What are your thoughts on our brains and tracking?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same thing again, where like, it just so depends, right? It depends on who you are as a human.
You're so diplomatic.
I know, it's like the worst answer, but it really does. I think it's, again, that whole listening to your body. So I think the benefit, right, is that I think especially actually when people first start getting into a movement program, if they're trying to enter into a program, right? They're not just like, I'm just going to stretch around today, but like, I actually want to like, here's my goal that I'm trying to reach. I think it can be a helpful tool to say, like, let's say your goal right now is doing, you know, 8,000 steps a day, and you have no idea how many steps you're doing, you know? So of course, like, that's going to be a really helpful baseline for us to start walking, using our measurements to see where we're at, and we can kind of progress with that. Or even like, let's say you wanted to get stronger and you're doing, you know, a dumbbell chest press, and you started out with 10 pounds. I always tell people, you know, hey, like, track that. So that way, like, the next week, you can see where you were at. You can actually see if you're getting stronger. That can be really helpful. But obviously there are so many downfalls, I think, that can come with it also. Like you said, I think there's an obsession that can come with it. Same with logging your food. I have 100%, I don't log my food anymore, but that was a thing for me for a while, where I was like kind of getting into that, and then it can become so obsessive. But, you know, I've had clients before tell me like, oh yeah, well, I looked at my watch and I didn't hit I didn't hit my steps. And so now I feel really bad about myself. And it's like, you know, life happens. Like, sometimes we're not going to always be getting in 8,000 steps. Sometimes you're sick. Sometimes, you know, like, I've had days too, right, where it's like I have MS, I have ADHD, all the things where like I just feel but I just feel fatigued. And again, we're talking about rest, and I'll have this moment of thinking like, I need to rest. Like, this is helpful for my body, but that like internal piece of me that's like giving me that guilt and shame of like, yeah, but you have to go work out. You know, you have to go do your movement. And so I think that when you can see that watch that's telling you like, hey, you didn't hit your goal, that can be really unmotivating. And then also, just to kind of tie it back also, where we were talking about the like listening to your body and that intuition, those apps get rid of all of that. You know, it's like, you know, if you're trying to think about even like heart rate responses, right? It's like, I'm working out, and, you know, so that's why a lot of times we'll use that RPE, which is the rate of perceived exertion. So if you're working out, let's say that, you know, we say that you're going to work out at like a 7 to 10 like level, which is also really hard to answer, but it's more like, you know, you're breathing heavily, but, you know, maybe you can have like 1 or 2 sentences of a conversation. So you can kind of gauge within yourself, like, how hard am I working right now? But sometimes it's like, I have no idea how hard I'm working. I'm going to look at my watch, though. It's going to tell me that my heart rate's at 140, so I know I'm working hard. You know, I think it can sometimes can really pull us out of our bodies, and that can be really detrimental.
Yeah. I know, right? It's like sleep psychologists hate sleep trackers.
Yeah. You're like, did I sleep well? Let the tracker tell me if I slept well. I don't know, but it's... Like, am I full? Did I eat enough calories? Yes, I'm full. Yeah, it's just like these constant things to pull us outside of our body. And, you know, I mean, again, I think it can be helpful to start, but yeah, it can be very unhelpful, I think.
Well, Well, and I think also paying attention is just not something that we are very good at, right?
No.
And so it's easier to rely on something else really quickly than it is to kind of do the work to get there. Yeah. I also, go ahead.
I should say, but some people, right? It's like, I'm not, like, if you're not into a program and you want to be into one, sometimes, again, having that external motivation or whatever, like, you know, sometimes it's like you find this dopamine, ride it, you know? It's like, okay, great, this is working for you right now. Maybe it'll help you get into a habit after a while because it's something that you're looking forward to. So also, you know, like, some of us get overwhelmed by a lot of things, but some people like the concept of checking things off. And so, you know, it's like, when I do virtual training with clients, I use an app called True Coach, and it like emails them their workout, and like when they're done with it, they can hit save, and it's like, you know, you did it, you completed your workout. You know, I mean, some people, you know, really get that kind of dopamine high off of that. And so, yeah, I think again, it's just really sussing out like, what do you need?
Yeah, we love star charts for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's like two personalities. There's the I want to check off all the boxes and have the stars tell me how good I am, and then there's the oppositional side of us, which is like, don't tell me what to do.
Yep, and that's all within both of us, right? Like I am both all the time.
I know, same.
Yeah, like some days I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna go clean all the things, and then the last one I'm like, I don't even want to drink water today because I'm annoyed that I'm supposed to. Like,
right? Or it reminds me of all those TikTok videos where it's like, I'm going for a walk to take care of my stupid mental health. I'm going on a stupid walk. Like, yeah, that's how I feel most days. But you know, the other thing I feel like many of us must struggle with, I'm always like, I struggle with it, so therefore we all must struggle with it. But
true.
Right? But is the I have a tendency to just push the envelope all the time, which is like, oh my God, I ran 5K today in 20 minutes, which I don't think has ever happened, honestly. I don't know why. I'm like trying to impress you or something.
I'm impressed.
No, but
for that too.
Well, okay, good. But I'm like, I have a certain time that I will do as 5K, and then I'll be like, okay, well, tomorrow I have to go faster. And it's like this idea that like maintenance or consistency is akin to failure. And I feel like that is an ADHD thing for sure, because I'm like, I see it in so many areas of my life where it's like with my podcast, right? Where it's like my numbers have to keep rising because that's the dopamine. And if they don't rise, it's basically feels like failure. And I'm like, how do I be okay with consistency? And then also being like, light bulb, no wonder we all freaking struggle with consistency.
I know,
It's really boring. But and the next thing you know, right? But the next thing you know, I push myself too far and I'm injured. And that's my constant hamster wheel cycle with running, which is I run, I push myself, and then I injure myself. And then back to the yoga mat or something a little more friendly to my brain. But I feel like you must see that a lot in either in your own life or with clients. Like, do you have any advice for
to be really honest,
back?
when you were saying that, I initially had all these ideas, and then right when you asked me, my brain's like, and there's nothing in here. So I mean, it's like, and it's just like, nothing. I don't know. But so give me a second. We're doing all the things. We put ourselves into overdrive. Oh, okay. I know what I was thinking. Okay. So I was thinking that, like, if you have a program, like, even if it's running, if it's anything, like, in theory, the best way to do that is that you do kind of go on this progression, but then you cycle back through, right? So it's like, if let's say it was running hypothetically, you do 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, but then we go back down. So that's going to help us not get injured. So I guess, like, A, there's that, if our goal is to get better. But B, yes, our goal does not always have to be better. And I 1000% have struggled with that. I actually, like, there was a period where I was like, I'm going to get really into CrossFit, because CrossFit, if you're good at it, like, that's an ADHDer's dream, right? Like, you're good at everything. It's like, you have to be strong and fast and mobile. And I was like, I am going to be the best at this. And so I went to class like 4 times, and I was like, there are way too many things, and I don't feel good at all these things. So I stopped. I was like, I don't know how to do double unders. There's these people over here are stronger at this than me, And so, which is like, a great place for my brain to be. And so, I think it's hard. Oh, I think actually I know when you were saying that, actually one thing I thought about too, you're talking about your podcast, is I feel like sometimes I'll do that even like financially, right? Where it's like, I think that's how society's also like taught us, is it's like, you're always supposed to be like making a certain amount or like making more money. And every once in a while I'll kind of sit back and be like, what am I looking for? It's like, okay, I can pay my bills. I can, whatever, but it's almost like this thing that like, if it's easy, it's not easy, but like, if I'm okay, it's not enough, like there should always be something that we're like, striving for. I think there's just so much again of like, just kind of thinking about like what our goals and intentions are again. You know, I mean, of course, I think like when we see little improvements or we get better at something, of course we all like that, but maybe our getting better, we can just like change what that looks like. Maybe it's getting better because we actually listened to our body, so we didn't do more. You know, it's like, ooh, that's better. Or maybe, you know, we have better range of motion. Maybe we're getting injured less. Like, I think maybe some of that, you know, is also like kind of reframe what that looks like.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think about that too in terms of weight loss and women, right? Because women are, you know, when I was obsessed with weight loss for so many years of my life, and I got to, it was a huge light bulb moment for me was when I got to like my lowest weight and I was still unhappy. Yeah, and I was like, when does it stop? Right? Like, when is there a place where you would be happy? And I was like, no, there is no, like, when you don't deal with the fundamental dissatisfaction, there's never going to be a place where you're going to get to where you're like, yay, I arrived. And so that was a huge moment for me, which was where I was like, oh, it's not about the weight loss. That's not what it's about. And I feel like that can have, you know, we can have that with so many areas of self-care where it's like, we're not dealing with the root issue the root issue of either, I don't know what, you know, but I can't think of another version of satisfaction, but I think there's something there in terms of how many of us feel so lost and, you know, we've been raised, like we have all of the micro traumas of being undiagnosed and always feeling like we're not fitting in and we're not like good enough and we're not trying hard enough. And even like your own, you know, therapist who was like, you need to try harder to not have anxiety. And you're Thank like, you. Welcome to my life. Well, how do I do that? Cool. Right.
Thank you.
You're right. But all those ways in which we're told like you're broken and then you're like, but I don't know what to do right now. And so why we start grasping at all these external things that promise happiness. This is deep. This is a lot deeper than I thought we were getting. That's what we do, right?
So,
we don't have.
It is, And I think, you know, I will, right. And I think like, especially as women, right, a lot of us are raised to be people pleasers. And so I think, I don't know, I feel like that like plays a little role into that too, where it's like, I need to be better. I need to make sure I'm not making anybody mad. I need to like, there's like this always, at least within me, there's always this sense of like, what I'm doing isn't enough. Or I actually told Kayla, not that, which I think some of this also is me. I grew up in the church. And so I think there's all sorts of traumas with that too. But even this feeling of like, I always feel kind of guilty and I don't even know why, you know, or like, I feel like I'm going to get in trouble and I'm like, I don't even know why. Like, there's not anything in specific. I'm literally, you know, but it's like, whatever I'm doing isn't right somehow, you know, like I'm reading right now and I should be doing this, or I'm working out and I should be volunteering, or like, it's just like, there's always something else that like is probably better that I should be doing. And again, it's like, are we not trusting ourselves? Are we not feeling satisfied within that? I think, the freaking patriarchy, man, also, I think it's like, it's just smashed us all down as women. It's like,
Oh my God. Right. I know. I don't think a podcast episode goes by where I don't question, is this ADHD or am I an angry feminist?
Both are true.
Both are true. But it's so true about the evangelical. Like I was talking about this recently where it was like, as an evangelical, you still believe you're going to hell, right? Like you still are, you just believe you've chosen it, right? So I'm like, that's a whole other stuff to unpack, which is like, you're constantly choosing to go to hell because it's been indoctrinated in you. And so it's like, that's a whole other thing to unpack. Oh, that's a whole other conversation we'll have someday. I'll have back. Maybe, right? I feel like I could like round up some of my guests who are all ex-Christians.
I would love that. I don't really like wear that hat publicly, but sometimes I think that I should, you know, I'm using a should here, but like, I always feel like, you know, there's a big world of it. And I think there's also my ADHD brain where I'm like, I'm going to jump into that community a little bit more too, because I think not to like completely, you know, navigate over there, but I think, talk about not trusting yourself. You know, I mean, I think that was honestly one of my biggest traumas from growing up within the church, is it's constantly that sense of like, you can't trust yourself because if, you know, this could be Satan that's telling you X, Y, Z. And so, you know, you're like, oh, okay, maybe my inherent self is bad. Or it's like, listen to God and they'll tell you X, Y, Z. So it's like, whatever voice is going on within you, it's not yours, you know, it's either this side or this side. And so I think it really pulls you away from any of your own thoughts. But
well, and I think an ADHD diagnosis also, again, this is totally derailing into a conversation about Christianity. So I apologize if you're listening to this being like, what happened to the fitness tips? But I think there's also like, there's something comforting about an ADHD diagnosis for a lot of Christian like mothers and wives who are really struggling, right? And are with their role as like domestic goddess. And so I'm like, there's a lot to unpack there too, in which the way in which Christianity can be really, really rigid about what you should find satisfaction in, and a lot of things that women are, a lot of roles that are handed to women are deeply unsatisfying. Right. And so anyway, all right. Well,
okay, sorry.
Seriously, right? I'm like, what am I going to title this episode? It's going to be like fitness and Christianity. So
fucked us up.
It's always the trauma. It just comes back to all the trauma. So having been diagnosed, what would you say you love most about your ADHD?
Yeah, I think that so much of it, honestly, is like, I feel like there was always like this sense of me that really liked who I was. But there is that little piece of you, right? That like the society tells you like, you're kind of weird or you're kind of whatever. So then you almost kind of learn to not like who you are for that reason. Or like, you know, certain aspects of yourself. And so I think that kind of like brought that back to be like, oh yeah, that kind of silly, impulsive human. I actually really do like her, you know, and I always did like her, but I think it kind of like brings that in a little bit. And I think also like, I don't know. I guess I feel like it's fun too, because I think I'm good at seeing not the world. That sounds really big of me, but like I can see a lot of different scenarios to things because we kind of have to, right? As ADHDers, it's like people tell us that we have to do something the way that they want us to, but we're probably doing it in a different way to get to the same point. So with that, I guess I feel like I'm like decent at problem solving or decent at like, just seeing things kind of outside of the box, just to kind of keep things interesting. And so I feel like that is a helpful way to, I don't know, it's a nice way to live in the world. You know, somebody says something, I'm like, but what about this? Or, you know, so yeah.
I like that. Right. I know, I feel like so many of my clients come to me with like, I've been diagnosed. How do I fix it? How do I fix all this stuff that I hate about myself? And I'm like, what if we decided to lean into all the crazy weirdness and stop, you know, and, like, why do you feel like these things need to be fixed? I don't want you to struggle, but I also feel like there's a lot of ways in which we need to kind of reframe what is valuable in our lives and what we bring to the table. So what would you rename ADHD to if you could call it something less confusing?
I know. Well, first off, I was thinking about it, right? Like ADHD, which has like deficit and diagnosis, like that just seems like so offensive. So first off, I'm like, there is no deficit, like A. Also, like, I don't know, or not diagnosis, disorder.
Yeah.
I'm like that. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm like, first off, just like all of those need to go away. And I was thinking like, so we know that there's other ways of like, right. I feel like there's like different ways of being ADHD or different ways of like, I feel like there's all these, like we've now kind of put everybody in these two camps, like neurotypical, neurodivergent, but I'm also like, there has to be like all of these different subsets within this. So this little piece of me is like, you know, we have like, I don't know, 5,000 breeds of dogs. Like what if we had 5,000 like different types of brains? And we just like named them something different, you know? This is what I was thinking. So instead of being like, this is what the ADHD brain is, and like if all of them had different names, but then like the way that I feel like a lot of us like ADHD women, like what if we were like the masterminds? I feel like that's a good one. If we like, that was like our little niche because we can like do all the things, you know, like sometimes it's overwhelming, but also we can, like, it's there.
I like it. I kind of like the idea of like all the different breeds. If you like, which dog would you be? Cause I was like, which dog would I be? But yeah, right. Cause it's like, I mean, one of the things I love about this question is we really sort of get to the heart of like, is this a disorder? Is this not a disorder?
Right.
Because on the one hand, nobody comes to their diagnosis because they're like, everything's going wonderfully in my life. I need a name for this superpower, right? So there's obvious struggle involved in living a life.
But I think that's just because we have such a narrow focused society, right? It's like society is like, hey, you know, we're a circle, and like all of us are like, but I'm a star, I'm a heart, I'm a triangle, and we're all trying to shove ourselves into this circle. So I think that, I feel like that's like where it's like, well, let's just name all of us, you know, and like, like nobody's typical, but it's just like we need to be like way more creative, you know, so we need to open everything up a little bit more so that none of us are feeling disordered.
Right. I know. And exactly. It's like the disorder only exists when you're trying to shove like a shape sorter, right? That when you were talking about that, it reminded me of those old Tupperware shape sorters. Shape sorter, that's a hard one. You know, of like trying to get jam the shape into that. And if we could just like open it up and just let everybody go and just be like, yeah, they all fit. It's great. So the disorder only exists when you're trying to force things. But at the same time, there's so many situations where we have to, you know, exist in school systems and in jobs and workplaces where we don't feel like we can ask for help we don't even know what to ask for oftentimes without the help without the validation of calling it a real clinical disorder. And I feel like we're seeing this in the UK right now, which is like all of the lack of services where people are really fighting to take this seriously as opposed to saying, oh, we're just like quirky people who bump into things, that there's like a real struggle there. But at the same time,
I would say that's super valid, because I feel like even like when you get, you know, into like the LGBT community, and then people will say something along the lines of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, now you guys get married, so you're equal. And it's like, okay. Or even like women, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, it's the same now. You guys have the same rights. And it's like, well, it's not. So yes, also just to say like, I don't know, like yes, I think like you said, like acknowledging that there are so many differences. I'm sorry, I like kind of hijacked that, but I was just thinking too, I also wonder though, if even neurotypical people, right, have so many more like needs or things that would help them function well and like better in life that they also were not talking about. And so it's more just like, what if we also opened up this space for everybody to be like, this is what would make my life better. And, you know, like if we all could just somehow figure out a way for us to all do that, you know, I don't think it's like that out of the question.
Well, this is where I think it's really important to channel white man energy, because that's where they don't struggle. They don't struggle with like outsourcing and asking for help, and they don't feel any shame when they can't do something. They're like, nope, not my job. Get somebody else to do that. Right. Whereas I think as women, we're much more socialized to do all the things. And, you know, because likability and acceptance is so interwoven in our worth that we have that tendency to be like, I should be able to figure this out. I got to do, you know, we're much more, we take on so much more as opposed to being like, nope, not my job. This is not, you know, this is above my pay grade. And
I kind of got it. I'm going to do all the things.
Right. And so it's like, oh no, I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I'll figure it out. And, I think that's where I'm always sort of like, you know, and there, you know, especially with business and stuff where I'm like, there's so many entrepreneurs who are neurodivergent men who are just like, they don't spend any time worrying about if they can figure out their calendar or how they're going to get it all done. They're just like, delegate the shit out of that. And so I'm like, we need to really harness.
Somebody wants to help them. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I'm like, you got to harness that energy a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's true though. Yeah.
So do you work with online clients, or do you mostly work with in-person clients? How can people find you?
I do a ton of online clients. Yeah, I do a little bit of both. But I've worked in like a box, you know, style gym for a long time, right? Like a 24-hour fitness or whatever. And I think like I always, again, like just super neurodivergent, super ADHD, but I never really felt like I fully fit into like what that gym space is. You know, you have all sorts of like different camps of people, and I feel like, again, I'm always like kind of like a little piece of all of them, but I don't fit hardcore into like one specific. And so COVID happened, and so I started, you know, virtually training a lot of my current clients. So even though they still live in Omaha, it was just like, we can't be around each other. So it was like, you know, we were like virtually training with stuff that people had in their house. But yeah, then kind of from there, like I still train some of those people, but it just kind of has expanded into working with a lot of people. So I went off on my own. I guess I didn't necessarily say that, but so work at the box gym, COVID, whatever. Now I officially like work on my own. I think for neurodivergent people, that's so important too, just to like not have to worry about other people's rules and how that works. But I really have kind of started leaning into this verbiage that I use of like working with people who I'll try to say are like, have like gone through something, which sounds kind of like ethereal, but I think that like being diagnosed with ADHD could be something like that. You know, MS and autoimmunity could be something. Maybe it's a big job change. Maybe it's just like discovering something else about yourself, where I kind of feel like, you know, sometimes we get to this point in life where you find out something new about yourself. Maybe you perceive yourself in a different way now, that I feel like our fitness and the way that we move maybe would, I don't want to say should, maybe it would be helpful though if that changed as well, you know? And so again, I think it's like, okay, I see myself a little bit differently. So what if you come into that now from this like place of empowerment of trying to be stronger and trying to be more, you know, mobile, and just like, I always think like there are certain types of movements for me specifically. I like being strong. I like moving my body in like functional real life ways. That it just makes me show up, I think, to the world better. You know, it's like, I feel better about myself in this way. So now I'm going to go out into that way in a more confident way, versus again, that mentality of going into the gym and like, I'm just trying to be less because I'm not good enough. And I need to, you know, I did something bad as far as my diet goes, so I need to work this off. So I guess all that to say that yes, I do work with people online and I do work with people in person. But that is just an avenue that I've really found, to be, I think, just exciting just to work with people within that realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I always use, I mean, accountability is so huge. And I feel like I often, with my clients, I talk about ADHD coaching like a personal trainer, where it's like, there are some people out there who can just join a gym and show up and use the equipment and they're fine with that. I am not that person.
Right.
And then there's some people who can sign up for classes because that's like the classes offer some structure and some accountability, but oftentimes I'll do that for a couple of weeks and then I don't know, I'll figure out some reason why I don't like it. And so like a personal trainer is somebody who I can be accountable to, and I can kind of externalize a lot of that motivation that I might not be feeling and say like, oh, you know, Marnie says I have to do this. I got to show up for Marnie. I can do it for her until I can do it for myself. Right. And realize it's like part of that investment.
Yeah. Well, I was say, like, I think also, so like, you know, the accountability you said, and like that I would quote, like, have you do it. But part of it too, again, is like, working with you and your individual brain. So the downside, like group classes are great, but the downside of that is that they're not individualized to you at all, you know? So it's like, I'm going to, you know, write a workout. I don't know who's showing up to my class. You're all going to do this workout, versus me saying like, I am working with Katie and I know that these are Katie's injuries. I know these are Katie's goals. I know that this is how Katie's body moves. I know that she's neurodivergent. So she, you know what I mean? Like there's so many factors that can go into that. So making this a better experience for you individually. So you're going to come out of that actually feeling like way more empowered, you know, instead of maybe showing up to something and being like, I didn't get the same experience that everybody else did. Like it wasn't great for my brain, or I worked too hard because I didn't listen to my body, or I got injured, or, you know, so I think that, yes, like I think it's really helpful actually, even if it's not long-term, for people actually to work with somebody to kind of help guide them within that realm, not just even guide you like, yeah, from a base level, but for guide you from like who are you and what are you looking to do, you know?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. And I think that that helps a lot when so many of us have a really hard time with like money and return on investment when it comes to things like this, where it's like, oh, you know, I'll just do the cheapest possible thing. I'll just go to YouTube. And then it's like, well, you know, what are the actual investments long term in terms of some of these choices? And I certainly struggle with a lot of that. I'm like, damn it, I'll do it myself. And spoiler alert, I don't do it myself.
Or it's like, you just kind of like version that lasts way longer than it needs to. I think that's too, because again, like with my brain that initially was like, I'm gonna do this CrossFit and be good at all the things. And then realizing like, also, you know, if you watch, like, I'm just gonna bring back CrossFit for a second, but if you watch the people that are in like the games of that, you know, if they're actually that good, they're probably spending 5-6 hours of their day, you know, doing things to be good at that. And most of us don't have that time. So I think there's this component too, right? Of like, what is going to be, I guess, like efficient and effective. And so I think that can be really helpful when you have somebody to help you kind of program to be like, okay, I want to be, you know, do these things. Like, great. So I have 45 minutes. So within that 45 minutes, this is how we're going to warm up. This is how we're going to, you know, go through your strength and your conditioning so that you can get it all in one package instead of feeling like you have to do 50 different things, you know, and be kind of jumbled.
Yeah. And then, and teaching the skill to then be able to figure that out moving forward too. Yeah. So I'll put the link in the show notes, but what's the website is just your name, right? Marnie Bothmer?
MarnieBothmer.com. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have little breakthrough sessions. You can sign up on there too. Just like it sets up a Zoom. So you can always chat with me and just be like, hey, these are my goals. Or this is what I struggle with my ADHD or anything within my fitness.
Christianity.
If you do that, that is totally fine. Maybe just make a note about it, like within my little intake form so that I'm prepared.
Right. I'm trying to get you to rebrand, Marnie.
No, I think it would be okay to add into there. Yeah.
Right. You gotta niche down. Right. That's what they always say, right? Neurodivergent ex-Christians.
I think this is perfect. Yeah. MS, autoimmunity. I think,
Right. LGBT. Angry feminists. Yeah.
Real tight, can I get it? Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And I feel like I threw so many questions at you. And this was awesome. I learned a lot. And I thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah. it was super fun. I loved it.
Okay.